Well, hey, church, as part of our Vision Sunday message, we had the chance to go out on the water around this whole theme of really hoisting our sails, catching the wind of His Spirit, setting sail for the unreached. And Pastor John sat down with the chairman of the elders at the time, Rob Bokheim, and really, I guess they just had a unscripted, open, raw, and honest conversation just about some of the themes that the Lord had been speaking to John about for the church. And so we've put together just this piece of that conversation, and we hope it really maybe unpacks some things for you. Maybe you get to hear a little bit more of John's heart and just some of the moments maybe that we haven't yet heard about the vision. So yeah, may it be a blessing to you, may it encourage you, and here it is.
So John, you've talked a lot about breakthrough in Jesus. What does that look like?
I think breakthrough can look like so many different things, whether it's personal breakthrough in people's lives, or as a church, a breakthrough. But either way, I think it's a breakthrough into the breaking in of His kingdom. Like when His kingdom comes into our lives, and when we allow ourselves to be empowered by His Spirit in that way, then we start to see the fruit of the kingdom. We start to see His work being done, and breakthrough comes into our lives into an alignment with what the kingdom looks like. So for someone who needs a breakthrough in being set free from maybe the things that are constraining them or holding them back or even keeping them captive, then breakthrough looks like being set free in His Spirit into being no longer captivated by those things, but being more into the alignment of being wooed by His Spirit and being captivated by Him rather than the things of the world. So, as a church, as a whole, then, breakthrough means His people collectively coming together to see a breaking out of the kingdom in and amongst us. I kind of like to think of His glory breaking in amongst us, but bursting out through us, wherever we go and whatever we do. So I think the kingdom in a focus point then becomes the idea of, breakthrough.
And when that moment comes, if it's a moment or a time, I've been thinking like if you're leading an army or even an athlete, there's a time you've been preparing for something, and then when, a bit like David and Goliath, that there's that moment that you need to step into. Just wondering how will you recognise when that sort of moment or that time of breakthrough has come? I mean, you've spent so many years in prayer, going after this on behalf of the church, and many other people have been praying into it as well. But there's, I think sometimes a leader like you will just recognise that time or that moment and like, right, church, now we've got to move because now is the time. This is what we've been preparing for. This is what we've been waiting for. This is what the Lord's been leading us to. Call to arms, let's go.
I think that's a difficult question to ask because some of that's an intuitive leadership space where you feel like being in tune and intimacy, being in abiding states is when you hear most clearly. And so I think the importance is to be in the space to hear, get so busy doing our own thing and even good things, but still kind of moving so fast and pushing so hard that you forget to think, well, maybe the Lord has us in a slightly different direction, or now's the moment to capitalise, or now's the time to run and not walk, or now's the time, when we're sitting on a boat, now's the time to hoist the sails and just let His wind, His Spirit take us to where He wants us to go, and be intuitive as to where that wind's coming from and where it's leading and where He's wanting to bring us to. I think you know, you've got experience out here on the water, and you'd probably feel like that's, you know, you taught me once. You can hear the wind, you can see the wind, you can feel the wind. And I think it's the same in the Spirit in leadership is, you know, attuning yourself to what God's doing and what He's saying in those moments. And that doesn't come without a deep abiding. Otherwise you're running under motor, you know, not under the sail.
Mm-hmm. I remember last time we were out here in the storm at night. Everything went dead calm. The lightning was cracking. But that wasn't the most powerful part of the night. For me, it was when we were anchored up and we were trying to sleep. And you're up in the front of the boat where the waves go up and down. And I had chosen to be at the back of the boat where I knew it was going to be calm.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, that's great.
In the middle of the night,
it's like when you're flying on a plane.
The wind changed, and the wind came up from the northeast, quite a strong wind, and we're both trying to sleep whilst the boat was bang, bang, bang on the waves. And I just really sensed that night, and I think it was true that you were just. It was like you were Jacob, I think, wrestling with the angel. You were just up there, just wrestling with this concept of trying to be still in the storm.
I kept thinking.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, it was, you know, when you're half asleep, half awake, you're not really getting good sleep because you know you're moving around. I wouldn't say I've ever been overly comfortable on the idea of being in a boat at night, you know, out on the water and those sorts of things. You know, I grew up around speedboats, not sailing boats, and so being stuck out there thinking, oh, this thing keeps pitching and rolling and it's very uncomfortable. And I actually was wrestling with the Lord, but it was more in a sense of, I just kept having that idea of He slept in the storm. And I can remember just thinking through the passage constantly of when Jesus was asleep and the disciples were terrified, and I was not terrified, but I was like, oh, this is not comfortable. This is not great. This is, you know, there's a storm, there's, you know, waves are moving, and trying to think the whole time, how do you get to sleep in this? Jesus, I just need some peace and amongst the storm, you know, like, what do I do? And I remember in my mind, like, trying to tell the waves to be still, trying to operate in that peace that Jesus had, but probably was far much more like the disciples at that point, going, this isn't very comfortable. This is not overly a pleasant environment right now, you know. Yeah.
And did you manage to come to a point of stillness?
Not until we moved. It's in the middle of the night, picking up the anchor and moving to a more sheltered space. No, I don't think I came to an ultimate peace, but I came to a place of trust. Mm-hmm. And I think there's sometimes a difference between those two things. Trusting is resting in the fact that you're not going to drown. I was never in fear of that we were drowning or that we were going to. I did think about this anchor could easily be pulling out here, and we could end up, you know, on the rocks, or we could end up on the bank and all the rest of it. But it was more just a sense of, okay, well, if this is what it's like, then I've got to learn to go roll with it type of thing, you know.
So you speak about trust. Speak to us about the trust you have in the Lord and the trust that you have in the vision that He's given you.
That really is a good question, because I think trust ebbs and flows, but ultimately that's your sure anchor has to be in Him, has to be in those places where you can just, I think trust develops over time, just like any relationship. And, you know, we're the ones that aren't trustworthy in the relationship. You know, God is trustworthy. He is faithful. He is good. I think He reminds us of that all of the time. And I think probably lesson of leadership for me over the years has been to just try to keep coming back to that understanding that He is good, He is faithful, His love does endure forever, He has plans and purposes. He's not caught up in the things of this world that would cause us to get off track and into the wrong places. That's us. And so the trust has to keep coming back to the truth. And so the anchor point for truth, for trust, becomes that truth that we have in Him, that we know of Him, that His Word clearly states to us who He is and what He's like.
Interrupt.
Yeah.
Who is He and what is He like?
Oh. Need to be a better theologian than I to unpack that in its fullness. But I mean, He is Jesus. I think, we see the nature of the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in relationship with each other. We get this beautiful picture of the totality of God, the wholeness of God. And for me, the love of a father, the sure steadfastness of His wisdom and His loving kindness. I love the fact in Exodus, when God introduces Himself to Moses, Exodus 34, I think it is, and He says, I am, He says, I am gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in love. And I kind of keep coming back to the thing that if you introduce yourself to somebody, you say, hi, I'm Rob, this is who I am. This is. Sometimes we say what we do, sometimes we say, a little bit about us, our family, and those sorts of things. And God just comes straight out with His friend Moses and lets him know who He is. And I think if He declares Himself like that, they've got to be some of the primary qualities of who God is. His loving kindness, it just abounds towards us. His faithfulness, the fact that He's merciful and He's gracious. And then you see that actually lived out in the life of Jesus and how He moved. As you read through the Gospels, you see Him moving with people, and you see that coming into a very personalised, approach to the real life issues of people, and how then Jesus moves in those spaces with all the qualities of God in His sinless ways as a man, being empowered by the Holy Spirit to bring people to life in accordance with those very character qualities and of who He is, And I think, going back to the early question on breakthrough, that's kind of the breakthrough, isn't it, that we all desire and want. It's to release the things into how we were created to be and what God sees in us, and how He wants us to be in relationship with Him, that brings us into alignment with what He knows is best and how He's designed things to be. And we only can do that by His help. It's only by His grace, And so that empowering presence of His within us, the Holy Spirit living within us, allows us to enter into being more in line with the character of God and who He designed us to be. And so then you get into the fruits of those spirits, the love and the joy and the peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness. And these things then become the markers that our lives have been transformed and changed by Him at work in us. And yeah.